It's crazy how fast a perfect love story can turn into a headline. For years, Jeannie Mai and Jeezy were the couple everyone swore had cracked the code. Two grown adults who'd survived heartbreak, healed their trauma, and found peace in each other's arms. But behind that polished Instagram aesthetic, something dark was brewing. Because now, years later, Jeannie's done playing quiet.
Things that I've been criticized for my whole life in my past relationships. Jeannie, you're too deep. You think about things too much. Like, why does everything gotta have a purpose? And I'm not one for small talk or small conversations. I wanna know, why do you think the way you do? What brought you to look at things the way you do? Who are you? Who's important to you? And I found my equal.
She's calling out the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal that left her rebuilding her life from the ashes of the man she once swore was her safe space. And the wild part, Jeezy's been out here giving interviews about growth and purpose, acting like he's the enlightened one, while Jeannie's finally ready to tell the real story behind the smile.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, it takes every day to just really sit and just be quiet in your thoughts, take care of me. But one thing I know is, you give God your pain, he will give you his power. Girl, period.
The same man who once said he'd never truly experienced love, turns out that statement was more confession than reflection.
That's the crazy thing, though, because as I sit here at 46, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But I can't honestly tell you that I've experienced love.
See, this didn't start with the divorce papers. It started long before, when Jeannie first met him. Back then, she was fresh off heartbreak, coming out of a toxic marriage that left her swearing off love entirely. She told the world she didn't want marriage, didn't want kids, didn't even want to risk giving anyone that kind of power over her again. Then came Jeezy. Calm, charming, calculated. He spoke like a man who'd already survived his storms. He wasn't chasing fame or chaos, or at least that's what Jeannie thought. He was talking about healing, faith, and purpose.
More than ever,
Yeah.
I understand my purpose is walking in these footprints that God's left for me.
And what is your purpose
My
now?
purpose is to be the best version of myself and to teach my culture everything that I learned along the way.
And for a woman who'd spent her life protecting her heart, that sounded like peace. They met on The Real, just another guest interview. Nothing out of the ordinary. But what started as friendly banter turned into late-night phone calls, quiet dinners, and eventually, that first date she'd later describe as magic. They ate sushi, talked for hours, and even salsa danced before the night was over. Jeannie said that by the end of that night, she could actually see forever with him. It was supposed to be her second chance, her redemption arc. By the time they made their relationship public, fans were obsessed. They called it grown love, healed love, goals. Jeannie glowed different. Her interviews were filled with gratitude and soft smiles. And Jeezy? He played the part perfectly. Suit pressed, words polished, always talking about being a better man, about how love had changed him. In 2021, she said something that hit fans right in the heart. Jeezy made me realize I'd never really felt safe in my life. That one quote defined their relationship for millions of viewers. She said she finally understood what love could be: stable, secure, peaceful. She even told audiences she found her equal. But behind that peace, cracks were forming. Because here's what nobody knew. While Jeannie was discovering safety, Jeezy was busy building an image. He'd been through his rough years, his street era, his rebrand into the motivational rapper. But Jeannie gave him something he couldn't get anywhere else: credibility. A new chapter. The family man who found redemption through love. And Jeannie gave him everything. She changed her mind about marriage. She changed her stance on motherhood. After years of saying she didn't want kids, she went through IVF, hormones, the entire emotional roller coaster, all because she believed in their dream. When baby Monaco arrived, it felt like the fairy tale had come full circle. Fans celebrated. Magazines called them Hollywood's quiet power couple. Jeannie would post pictures of their daughter, captioning them with quotes about faith, growth, and healing. And he leaned right into that narrative. But then, quietly, things shifted. He started to pull away. The man who once made her feel safe became distant, busier, colder. The same person who taught her what peace looked like started moving like a ghost in his own home. And then came the interview, the one that broke the internet. Jeezy sat across from a talk show host, calm as ever, his tone almost saint-like. He said, "As I sit here at 46, I can't honestly tell you that I've experienced love." The internet froze. People couldn't believe it. This was the same man who had called Jeannie his soulmate, who talked about walking in the footprints God left beside her, who preached family and growth, now claiming he'd never experienced love. It felt like a punch in the gut, not just to Jeannie, but to anyone who ever believed their story. Because while he was out there publicly rewriting history, Jeannie was at home trying to process the wreckage. Friends say she was stunned, not just by the words, but by the tone, the lack of accountability. The way he made himself sound like the wounded hero in a story he'd set on fire himself. He claimed he'd tried therapy. He said he wanted peace. He said, "I can only do what I can do. I can't expect someone else to do what I'm doing." But Jeannie knew what that really meant. He'd already decided who was going to be the villain in his story. And to the world, that calm voice and humble posture made Jeezy look wise, like a man who'd simply outgrown his marriage. But for Jeannie, it was pure gaslighting dressed in scripture. Because while he was preaching about self-love, she was trying to piece herself back together from the shock of being blindsided. The same man who told her love was about partnership filed divorce papers without warning. One minute, they were celebrating his new book. The next, she was being served by a stranger. And the worst part, he wasn't even done with the performance yet. In the days after the filing, Jeezy's publicist released a statement calling it a heavy-hearted decision, insisting he still had love and respect for Jeannie. Meanwhile, she was left cleaning up the emotional mess and shielding their daughter from headlines. When she finally spoke, it wasn't loud. It was soft, but powerful. She said, "You give God your pain, and He'll give you His power." That one line told the world everything they needed to know. Jeannie wasn't broken. She was transforming. And as the dust started to settle, fans began to realize the truth. Jeezy might have won the narrative, but Jeannie was about to win the redemption arc, because for years, she protected his image. She defended him. She carried the peace he preached. But now, the silence was breaking. And when Jeannie finally started hinting that Jeezy's version of events wasn't the full story, people started asking questions he couldn't afford to answer. By the time the divorce was finalized in June 2024, Jeannie had gone completely silent. No interviews, no statements, no drama. Just a few quiet posts about healing, prayer, and her daughter. But behind that calm, there was a storm brewing. Because while Jeezy was out there selling his evolved man image, giving interviews about finding purpose, walking in God's footprints, and learning to love himself, Jeannie was sitting on the truth, the whole truth. And when she finally decided to break her silence, the picture she painted was nothing like the story he'd been telling. She'd stayed quiet for their daughter, for peace, for dignity. But silence can only hold for so long when someone keeps rewriting your life in public. Every quote Jeezy dropped in those post-divorce interviews hit her like a reminder. When he told the world he'd never truly experienced love, Jeannie heard the subtext loud and clear. He was erasing her. The same woman who stood by him through every breakdown, every rebrand, every speech about growth. That interview was his fresh start, his rebirth. For her, it was a slap in the face. Sources close to Jeannie say that hearing him talk like that felt like watching a stranger wear her memories like a prop. She had been his partner, his wife, the woman who prayed with him, who sat in therapy sessions and tried to save their marriage even after she felt it slipping away. But Jeezy's narrative made it sound like she never existed, or worse, that she was part of the problem. And that's where the shift happened. Jeannie realized she wasn't dealing with heartbreak anymore. She was dealing with a man who was using his platform to control the story. The interviews, the calm tone, the growth quotes, they weren't healing. They were branding. Because let's be real, Jeezy didn't just lose a wife, he lost the image that came with her. The family man look, the credibility that softened his street legacy, the press that called him the example of mature love. Jeannie's grace had become his PR. And when that grace finally ran out, he replaced it with philosophy. He told Nia Long in that now famous interview, "I can only do what I can do. I can't expect someone else to do what I'm doing." But what Jeannie wanted to say was, you can't claim self-growth while stepping on the person who helped you grow. She wasn't perfect. She's never claimed to be. But for her, love wasn't about performance. It was about showing up when the cameras were off. Behind closed doors, she fought for that marriage. They went to counseling, tried resetting their communication, even planned family retreats to focus on each other. But Jeezy had already checked out. His heart wasn't in the healing. It was in the headlines. When he started giving motivational quotes instead of honest answers, Jeannie knew what time it was. The man she thought was her protector was really just protecting his image. And what broke her most wasn't just the lies, it was how calculated it all felt. While she was planning their next family trip, he was already talking to lawyers. When she was promoting his book and telling the world how proud she was of his evolution, he was finalizing the papers that would end everything. That's not heartbreak. That's betrayal dressed in calm. So when people started calling her dramatic for posting quotes about strength and silence, she didn't argue. She knew the truth would come out on its own. Because behind every soft caption she posted, sometimes peace means walking away from what tried to break you. There was a woman who'd been publicly humiliated by the same man she helped rebuild. And she wasn't the only one who saw through it. Fans started pulling receipts, matching timelines, and realizing the pattern. Jeezy's divorce filing had been sitting with his attorney months before Jeannie even suspected a thing. He'd notarized the paperwork back in March 2024, but waited until September to make it public. So while Jeannie was showing him her culture in Vietnam, introducing him to her family roots, taking family photos, and calling it the most spiritual trip of her life, he already knew it was over. That's the part that hit her the hardest. Not the filing, not the interviews. The fact that he let her love him out loud while he was planning to leave her in silence. And when fans started calling him out for it, Jeezy doubled down on the Zen act. He posted black and white photos of himself in the studio, captioning them with lines like, "Truth doesn't need validation." But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't need validation, but it also doesn't need distortion. By that point, Jeannie had stopped hiding behind positivity. She started hinting at what really happened, quietly, through interviews and captions that cut deep. She posted one that read, "You don't lose yourself when someone leaves. You lose yourself when you stop believing you deserved better." And just like that, the narrative flipped. Fans who once thought Jeezy was the peaceful one started seeing through the act. They began rewatching his interviews and noticing how every time he said growth, he dodged accountability. How every time he said, "I'm learning to love myself," it really meant I've rewritten the story so I don't look like the villain. Because that's what this was all about. Optics. Jeezy's career was built on reinvention. He'd gone from trap star to motivational author, from rapper to philanthropist, from husband to healed man. And Jeannie, she was the collateral damage in his rebrand. The woman who helped him evolve became the example he used to sell that evolution. But Jeannie's done letting him have the last word. Her friends say she's been writing everything down, not for revenge, but for record. Because when people twist your truth long enough, sometimes the only way to heal is to reclaim the story yourself. And she's doing exactly that. She's talking openly now about the way she lost herself in love, about how she confused comfort for connection, about how she let someone else's peace become her prison. It's not about bitterness, it's about boundaries. And now, with a year's distance from the chaos, Jeannie's voice sounds different. Steady, grounded, like a woman who finally stopped apologizing for surviving. She's not trying to prove she's happy, she just is. And that quiet strength, that's what Jeezy never saw coming. Because when the cameras are gone and the interviews fade, the truth is still the truth. He may have left the marriage with a book deal, but she left with clarity. And now that she's starting to speak, piece by piece, the world's finally beginning to see the full picture. Not the one Jeezy curated, but the one Jeannie lived. By late 2025, Jeannie Mai's silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. The woman who once whispered through heartbreak had found her voice again, and this time she wasn't speaking for headlines. She was speaking for healing. Because after a year of letting Jeezy play the philosopher, she'd finally had enough of watching him turn their wreckage into wisdom quotes. She'd stayed quiet while he toured podcasts, speaking about growth and finding peace. But the truth she carried was heavier than any caption could hold. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't a rant. It was revelation. She sat down for her first real interview since the divorce. No glam team, no studio lighting, just Jeannie. The host asked gently, "What made you finally ready to talk?" Jeannie took a breath and said, "Because silence protects the wrong people for too long." That one line shifted everything. For the first time, she peeled back the layers of what really happened behind the pretty posts and the joint statements. She didn't trash him. She didn't drag him. But every word she said cut deeper than any diss could. She said, "You can't build forever with someone who only sees you as a reflection of their image. You start thinking it's love, but really, it's a spotlight." The clip spread like wildfire. Overnight, TikToks were flooded with her words, women stitching their own stories to hers, about being strong for a man who called it growth while draining them dry. And just like that, Jeannie became something she never planned to be. The voice of every woman who'd ever been made to feel like she wasn't enough after giving her all. But what people didn't know was how deep Jeezy's lies had gone. Jeannie revealed that while he was doing interviews saying, "I can only do what I can do," he was quietly cutting her out of projects they'd built together. Business deals, foundations, even a documentary they'd started filming as a couple. She said he framed it like cleaning up the business side. But what he was really doing was rewriting history, removing her name from everything that didn't serve his solo image. She talked about how he'd gaslight her with calm words and cold silences, how he'd say, "I need peace," every time she asked for communication. turning her pain into proof that she was the problem. And then came the gut punch. Jeannie said she found out about the divorce from her team before she ever heard it from him. She was literally in the middle of a production meeting when her phone buzzed with the headline. Imagine that. The man who called himself her equal didn't even have the decency to call. It was the kind of betrayal that humbles you in silence. She said she didn't cry right away. She just sat there, numb, staring at the phone screen like it was in another language. And in a way, it was. Because everything she thought she knew had just become fiction. But Jeannie didn't stay broken for long. She went inward, poured herself into therapy, faith, and her daughter. She started showing up in public again, not as a victim of heartbreak, but as a woman who rebuilt herself from scratch. And when she talked about motherhood, the entire tone changed. She said, "My greatest accomplishment in life will always be who I raise. Because when the noise fades, that's what love is supposed to look like. Safe, pure, unconditional." That quote hit the timeline like lightning. Fans flooded her comments with messages like, "She's healed," and "This is the Jeannie we missed." Others said she didn't just move on, she evolved. Meanwhile, Jeezy tried to keep the narrative under control. He appeared at events smiling for cameras, quoting peace and purpose like scripture. But even his calm started to look performative. Because once Jeannie spoke, his mystique cracked. People weren't buying the guru act anymore. They remembered the timeline, the quiet filing, the blindsiding, the cold interviews, and it became painfully clear. The man who said he'd never experienced love had been loved harder than he could ever admit. But Jeannie's not trying to prove that anymore. Her peace isn't performative, it's real. Now when she posts, it's not about revenge or heartbreak. It's about balance. Her captions read like journal entries. Healing means remembering who you were before they broke you. Or, God removed what I thought I needed to remind me who I am. Her energy shifted from defending herself to defining herself. She's back to hosting, back to producing, back to smiling. And this time, it's not curated. It's genuine. The industry that once whispered about her behind closed doors is now calling her a comeback story. And fans are saying what everyone's been thinking. Jeannie didn't lose Jeezy, he lost Jeannie. Because when the dust settled, one truth stood taller than the gossip. He taught her how to trust again. But she taught him what accountability really looks like. And that's the part that will haunt him long after the interviews stop. Jeannie closed her latest podcast appearance with one last line that sums up everything she's been through. She looked right at the camera and said, "Love without respect isn't love. It's performance. And I'm done performing." That clip alone told us this chapter's closed. The fairy tale's over. The illusion's gone. But Jeannie Mai, she's just getting started. And if there's one thing this story proved, it's that no matter how loud a man's narrative gets, the truth always finds its mic. So what do you think? Did Jeezy craft the image of a changed man just to protect his ego? Or was Jeannie right all along about the lies he built his peace on? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.